Hello and welcome to Talkin' Daily Sports, episode 2. The first episode, we are going to be talking about all things sports related here today. It is Monday, September 20th, 2021. And what a weekend of college football and NFL football we had, along with golf and others. So we're going to hop right into it. Starting with college football. Obviously on Saturday, getting it kicked off, we had a huge game. The Penn State whiteout game in Happy Valley. The whiteout game is one of the best atmospheres in college football, if not the best atmosphere in college football. And Penn State pulled it out. They won 28-20 over Auburn. And this was an interesting game because, obviously it's the whiteout game. It's probably the best atmosphere in college football of the entire year. And it's game 3 against an SEC opponent. And man, oh man, did that Penn State defense look good. Really good. And Sean Clifford did what he needed to do. He wasn't flashy, but he got the job done. And that Penn State defense was all she wrote. And Bo Nix just was Bo Nix in a big-time game. He just didn't show up. It was disappointing for Auburn. That was a tough game, no matter how you put it. That was going to be a tough game. And Penn State wanted to pull it out, and they get to play. They get Villanova and then Indiana before they have to go to Iowa. So that will be a very interesting matchup too. Obviously, top 6 teams ranking right now, where that will be interesting. Where those two will be ranked in the next 3 weeks, we will see. Also in college football, Alabama and Florida played, and what a game that was. It looked like Alabama was going to pull away. They went up 21-3, but Florida fought back. They were a 2-point conversion away from tying the game and just couldn't pull it out. Obviously, Emory Jones started this game. He played the whole game. Anthony Richardson was supposedly hurt. I don't know the whole details, but I think if Anthony Richardson started, I think Florida possibly could have won. Bryce Young, 22 for 35, 240, and 3 TDs. Alabama's going to Alabama. They play Southern Miss at home next week before they have a huge game in Tuscaloosa against number 13 Ole Miss. And that Ole Miss offense looks pretty much unstoppable right now. They just barrel rolled Tulane on Saturday. And a team in Tulane that took Oklahoma down to the wire in week 1, who Oklahoma was supposedly one of the most talented teams in the country. But Ole Miss just handed it to him. Matt Corral is right now the Heisman frontrunner, in my opinion. Maybe I'm a little biased because I do go to Ole Miss, but Matt Corral had 7 total touchdowns, passed for 335 and 3 TDs, also rushed for 68 yards and 4 touchdowns. That Ole Miss offense, it's going to be tested, though. It's going to be tested in 2 weeks in Tuscaloosa, which is the biggest game of the year for Ole Miss for sure. So that is going to be a crazy atmosphere there. Also around college football is Georgia took care of business against South Carolina. Nothing really too much to talk about there. Oklahoma did not look good against Nebraska. They really have struggled through the first. I mean, obviously they beat Western Carolina 76-0, but that doesn't really matter. They barely beat Tulane. That was supposed to be a home game for Tulane actually, but it got moved because of Hurricane Ida. And then Nebraska takes Oklahoma down to the final few minutes of that game, and Oklahoma ends up pulling it out. I don't know how good Oklahoma is this year. It's really hard to tell. I mean, there's 3 teams in the top 10 that you could really argue shouldn't be there. That's actually maybe even 4: Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Clemson. I'll give Clemson a pass. They looked horrible against Georgia Tech, but they did pull that out. And then Ohio State looked pathetic against Tulsa. The only guy that didn't look bad was Travion Henderson. I think it's is that how you say his first name? Trayvon Henderson, who ran for 277 yards and 3 touchdowns. That is 3rd of all-time rushing yards in a single game by an Ohio State running back, only behind Trey Sermon and Eddie George. So huge game for him, despite Ohio State and CJ Stroud not looking particularly good. Another team that had group of 5 teams that had a really good weeks. Cincinnati went on the road to Bloomington, Indiana, and took care of business against Indiana. Obviously, Indiana last year was a top 10 team going into a bowl game, and that was not an easy game. It tested them, and they go to Notre Dame. They go to South Bend in 2 weeks. They have a bye next week, and they go to South Bend on October 2nd. So keep an eye on that matchup as Cincinnati tries to make a playoff push for the first time in program history, I believe. Don't quote me on that. And then the other group of 5 team, BYU, who I'm really high on. I think they're a good team. They took care of business against Arizona State, and they got the win. So good job by BYU. And another game, Michigan State took care of business. I think they were actually underdogs, I believe, or maybe they were favored. I don't remember, but they were at Miami. I think they were underdogs because Miami was ranked and it was at Miami. So, but Michigan State took care of business and they look like a really good team right now. So congrats to them. Fresno State, another group of 5 team. If you saw Fresno State, Jake Heiner what was his last name? Jake Haener came into the game. He got hurt, came back in, and then threw the game-winning touchdown against UCLA at UCLA. So huge game for him. Fresno State is 3-1, with their only loss being to Oregon on the road by a touchdown. So that's really impressive. I'm considering obviously Oregon went into Ohio State 2 weeks ago or last week and beat Ohio State, and they are ranked 3rd in the country right now. So moving on to Sunday, the NFL. And there were a lot of good games that in the early games specifically. The late games, but the Texans, I'll give the Texans a lot of credit. They're a lot better than I think people think. Obviously, they won last week against a really bad Jaguars team. But they gave Cleveland a gut check. Cleveland wound up winning 31-21. Tyrod Taylor did get hurt, sadly, and he's out for, I believe, a month with, I don't know what they said it exactly was. But disappointing for him after everything he's battled back with throughout the last few years, really. Baker Mayfield, he was good, nothing. He was average. He went 19 for 21, 213 yards and a touchdown interception, 105 QBR, nothing crazy. Also, the Buccaneers blew. I mean, this game was closer at some point, but Buccaneers wound up beating the Falcons 25-48. Matt Ryan threw 2 pick sixes. It was a rough game, to say the least. The Falcons their defense looks pathetic, and Tom Brady looks to be more in his prime than ever before, as he's thrown 9 touchdowns in the first 2 games, on pace for like 76 touchdowns or something like that in the new 17-game season this year. So there's not much really it was ridiculous. How about the game between the Titans and the Seahawks? That was a game to watch, especially if you were a fantasy player. If you had Derrick Henry, which I did, who went for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Titans winded up pulling out the win in overtime, 33-30. Tyler Lockett also had 8 for 178 and a touchdown for the Seahawks. I also had him. Those were my 2 guys that I had in fantasy in that game, and they right now are carrying the team this week. Cardinals and Vikings, what a game that was. Kyler Murray looks like an MVP candidate. He needs to cut down the interceptions a little bit, but the guy he's electric. I mean, with his legs, with his arm, it's just ridiculous what that guy can do with the football. And then the Sunday night football game, this was the game of the year so far, Chiefs and Ravens. The Ravens winded up pulling it out 36-35, beating Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And Lamar, obviously, we know Lamar. He did not have the best day passing. He threw 2 interceptions. He went 8 for 26 for 239 and a touchdown, and then obviously 2 interceptions. Rushed for 107 yards and 2 TDs. So, but Lamar is that guy. Happy for Lamar. Good for him. So the Ravens pulled that out. And the Packers and the Lions play tonight on Monday Night Football. And we will get to see that. So also moving on to golf. If you guys are interested in that. Golf, Max Homa pulled out the victory in the Fortinet Championship. I don't really know how to say it. He beat Maverick McNeely. Not much really over there. It's the beginning of the season. The Ryder Cup, however, is this weekend. So Europe versus the United States, obviously. Tune into that. That'll be hugely televised, and I will be watching that as well. Moving on to baseball. As we come down to the final 2 weeks now, I believe, of the season, it's coming down the wire for a lot of teams. A lot of teams are falling apart, including the Reds and Phillies, or excuse me, not the Reds and Phillies, the Reds and the Padres, as the Cardinals have taken that spot over now, and they have won 8 straight games and have a 3-game lead in that second wildcard spot with 15 games to go. Obviously, whoever doesn't win the division in the NL West between the Dodgers and the Giants will have that first wild card, and that's who the second wild card will have to face. So that's obviously very tough. The Milwaukee Brewers look like the Milwaukee Brewers. They're such a good team. And then the Rays, the White Sox, and Houston sitting there at the top, with the Red Sox and the Blue Jays right now with a 1.5 lead over the New York Yankees for that second wild card spot. And that wild card spot in the AL is coming down to the wire. In the AL or the NL East, the Braves have a 2-game lead over the Phillies. As we sit here, the Phillies play the Orioles and Pirates the next 7 days. So and the Braves play the Diamondbacks and the Padres on the road out west before they come home, and then play the Phillies for a 3-game set at home, and then the Mets at home to finish the season. So huge 2-week stretch for both the Phillies and Braves to determine who's going to win that division and get that 3rd seed and play, obviously, most likely, unless something crazy happens, the Milwaukee Brewers. So there's that. And I think that about wraps it up for today's episode. If you guys enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to follow me on Instagram. Link will be in the bio, and follow me on Spotify, whatever you're listening on right now to this podcast, or if you're on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube, and I will catch you guys in the next episode. Peace, guys.